Yo, what's going on, guys? It's your boy. Welcome back to another video. Today we're going to be talking about A Complete Unknown, the Bob Dylan biopic starring Timothée Chalamet. I actually, for the most part, really enjoyed this movie. Let's go ahead and dive into it, shall we?
Modern Movie Review.
Okay, so as with any movie, I would like to issue a spoiler warning. This movie is a historical biopic, so technically a lot of the stuff in here can't really be spoiled because, like, if you know just anything about the topic overall, you'll probably know what happens. But that being said, to talk about this movie, I was a really big fan of it. I think Timothée Chalamet's acting performance in this was absolutely incredible. I think that James Mangold is one of my favorite actors. I think he's done a really good job showcasing that he can do movies where the main character is like a lone traveler, and this movie felt a lot like that. I like this movie a lot in the aspect of the fact that Bob Dylan, if you know much about him, he's one of the most unknowable people ever. Like, he's somebody who doesn't necessarily like giving out information about himself. A lot of time in interviews, he would kind of like beat around the bush and not really answer a lot of questions. He is one of the most like unreliable narrators to ever exist. Like, a lot of people don't know much about him, and that's part of the reason why a lot of people left this movie with a lot of questions, and a lot of people, I think, watched this movie and thought, wow, they did a really bad job writing this movie. But I think that it's just such a great job of showing a testament as to who Bob Dylan was as a person. I feel like he was somebody who was kind of a lone traveler. He's somebody who didn't want to be known very well, and he's somebody who constantly would kind of like flip the script on certain things. Like, people would be like, hey, so you and Johnny Cash, this thing that happened, and he'd be like, oh my god, we were pen pals, and we met for the first time on stage. And like, he would like tell lies in interviews, and he would constantly like say things that like other people would just constantly like disagree with publicly. So the fact that they really play into this in this movie, I think is really interesting. Like, a lot of my biggest gripes with this movie are the fact that like there are certain elements that get underdeveloped, but I realize part of the reason it's getting underdeveloped is because Bob Dylan himself wouldn't want to focus on those specific things. Like, for the most part, we don't know anything about where he came from. We start off with him hitchhiking and traveling straight to New York. A lot of this movie kind of tiptoes around the fact that, like, is he homeless for the majority of this movie? Like, he's constantly living with Elle Fanning's character, somebody who is his love interest in this movie. And then there are long periods of times where like they're broken up and like she has like a new boyfriend and stuff like that. So it's just like, where is he living during those periods of time? When we first get introduced to him, he's living with Pete's, I can't remember his last name right now, but Edward Norton's character. And once again, for like a month or so, it definitely seems like he's living with him. And something that I think is really interesting is just like how little we fully get of the main character, because like he's in the movie obviously the majority of the length of the movie, but there's so little information that we truly learn about him. And I think that a lot of me had issues with it, but after leaving this movie or whatever and kind of like doing a little bit of research on Bob Dylan, and I now understand why we don't know a whole lot about the character, I think I enjoyed it a little bit more. He was a very complicated man. I think that Timothée Chalamet plays him incredibly well. I think that there's a lot of really good comedy in this movie. Bob Dylan is somebody who isn't necessarily a nice guy, and so there's a lot of jokes with him like doing things that are just straight up rude, and it's obvious that he just can't pick up on social cues. And I really love it. I think that this movie has a lot of great comedic aspects. I think that the music overall is fantastic. If you're a fan of folk music, you have a lot to enjoy in here. I think that his kind of like transition to rock and roll towards the end of the movie also is played really well. I really liked all of the sequences with Joan. I'm gonna put the actress's name on the screen real quick. I meant to look it up earlier. This actress was absolutely phenomenal. I've never seen her in anything before, but her stage presence for the sequences where they were on stage was absolutely fantastic. Her chemistry with Timothée Chalamet was really, really good. And I just think that her performance in here was absolutely powerful. I was very excited to see Elle Fanning. And I thought that Elle Fanning was going to be like the lead actress in this. And I was actually very disappointed by how little she was in the movie, but that other actress came in huge. Like, she had such a great presence, and I really, really loved it. Overall, I had a really good time with this movie. I don't have way too much to say about it because as much as I did like this movie, it is 2 hours and 20 minutes of just like, here's some of Bob Dylan's best songs. Here's him performing them. Here's him having some shaky relationships with certain people who he had shaky relationships with his life. There's a weird little love triangle thing where you're kind of expecting it to go some way where like, okay, he's going to end up with this person by the end of the movie. And by the end of the movie, he's still pretty much single. So that's kind of interesting. But that being said, for the most part, I enjoyed this movie. I thought the music was great. I thought the way they decided to end it was fantastic. And I had a really good time with it. So, if I had to give this movie a rating on a scale of 1 to 100, like I typically do, I'm giving this movie a solid 82. Like, I don't think it's fantastic. I don't think it's necessarily one of the best movies that came out in 2024, but I personally really enjoyed it. As somebody who's a big fan of live music, I think that they did a really good job of making all of the instruments really, like, how do I say this? Like, the audio mixing was really good. I loved all the music. I thought that the songs in here were incredibly lively, incredibly fun. And I will say something that I do like about this movie, it kind of made me feel like I halfway through the movie, there was just like randomly the thought that I had, which is like, I miss. Well, obviously, I never lived in those days, but like those were the good old days, and they genuinely were. Like he hitchhikes multiple times throughout this movie. At multiple times he's able to like go to somebody's house and like they have like spare bedroom set up, and like it used to be like a more common thing for like people to just be neighborly and like you could hitchhike, and it wasn't necessarily one of the most dangerous things ever. And everything I kept thinking about while I was watching this movie was, I feel like social media has. I'm gonna go on a giant tangent here. So if you just came for the review, that was that. Now here comes my tangent. Social media nowadays has kind of done like this really interesting thing where it's like back in the day, if a lot of bad things were happening, if there was a lot of like tragedy and stuff like that in the world, it wasn't necessarily easily like discussed. Like a lot of people didn't know about all these terrible things that were going on. Sex trafficking wasn't a huge thing that was, publicized. Like people didn't know that it was a thing that was happening. If it was happening, it's not something a lot of people knew about. And a big thing is nowadays we assume that a lot of things have gone significantly worse over the last like 50, 60 years. But a big thing is now that there's social media, we're just seeing it a lot more. Like a lot of this tragedy has always been a thing. It's always been a really big problem, but we didn't necessarily have a way of having it shoved in our face. And it's actually a really big thing that like the percentages of these things that are happening, like trafficking and like violence and stuff like that, the rates are still around the same that they've always been. It's just now we're seeing it all the time because it will constantly show up on like, okay, here's this thing that happened in this place, and oh, here's this thing that happened in this place, and oh, here's that thing that happened in this place, where it's like it's such a tiny percentage, but because you can see everything, it makes it feel like there's so much more terrible things going on. And I just feel like nowadays a lot of people, we don't have that sense of community anymore. We don't have that sense of being able to be like neighborly towards everybody. And this movie actually made me wish that I kind of lived back in the day instead of right now. But that being said, that was just a really good job of showcasing the time period. I think James Mangold is an incredible director, and he did a really good job mastering the time period. So I really liked that. But yeah, that being said, that was it for this video, guys. Thank you guys so much for coming by and checking it out. I love and appreciate you guys so much for watching. And if you liked it, feel free to like and subscribe. And I'll hopefully see you guys in the next one. Peace out. Bow, bow, bow.